Now that I've created a basic lane, I would like to save it and import it into Civil 3D and run some tests. Just as a quick review, we've got a simple rectangular shape here. We have variables that control the width, thickness, and slope of this object. We've also created a horizontal and a vertical target that controls the location of this corner, the edge of traveled way. This lane supports super elevation, and it has a custom material code assigned to the shape. To save this part, I'm going to come down to the Parameters palette and I'll click Packet Settings. Right here I can give the subassembly a name. I'm going to call this My Custom Lane. I can then come down to the description area and I can give this a more formal name. This will be what you see when you hover over the subassembly part in the tool palette in Civil 3D. If we want to go even farther, I can assign a help file. Let me drag this up a little bit. I can assign a help file. Just for a second, let me click the ellipsis button. Here's where you can select an HTML or a PDF or a Word document that contains the help documentation you'd like people to read in the event they want to view the help for this particular object. So that's how we can do that. There's also an entry here for image. If I click the ellipsis button, here's where I can select a common image file format. This image would then be used as the icon in the Civil 3D palette. Let me close this dialog box. So now that I've given my subassembly a name, I'll come up to the File menu and I'll choose Save As. I'll save this in a logical folder on my hard drive. I'm going to call this same name that I gave the assembly. I'll just call it My Custom Lane. I'll choose Save. Notice that it's going to save it as a PKT file. The packet file is essentially a zip file. Everything necessary to utilize this lane in Civil 3D is being collected together such that it'll work properly in Civil 3D. Let me click Save. Now that I've saved it, I'm going to minimize Subassembly Composer, and I already have Civil 3D running. I am currently in a drawing called Subassembly Composer Test File. This is my playground, if you will, where I can prove my subassemblies before rolling them out into the production environment. In this drawing, I've got a surface. Let me zoom in. I've got an alignment. If I select this alignment has super elevation properties assigned to it, so we can use this to test the super elevation. I press Escape. If I drag this over, I can see that we have a proposed profile and an existing surface profile that's been pulled. I have also created an assembly object already. Let's start by freeing up some real estate. I don't think I'm going to need the tool space, so I'm going to close that. If you look over here, you can see my tool palette is open that contains all of my subassemblies. If yours is not, you can always select the assembly and then come up and click the tool palette button to toggle that on. To add my custom subassembly, I'm going to create a new palette. I'll do that by right-clicking on an existing palette, and I'll choose New Palette. I'll call this palette Custom. I'll press Enter. So now I have a blank slate where I can add custom subassembly parts. I will then right-click on the Custom tab, and I'll choose Import Subassemblies. I will then click the Folder button. We'll go to that folder that contains my packet file. I'll select it and click Open. I would like to import this into the tool palette onto the custom tab, and I'll click OK. Everything from that zip file then was installed in my local version of Civil 3D such that I can now use this subassembly part. If I hover over this, you can see there's the more formal description I gave. I do not have a help file. At this time, we didn't pick one. Likewise, I'm seeing the generic white square for my icon. To add this lane to the drawing, I'll select it. And let me come over, I'll zoom in on my assembly and I'll click to place it. You can see it's going on the right side first. Remember, we set that default. I will then click the insertion point to get it on the other side. We're making a symmetrical road. For right now, we'll close the tool palette just to free up some space. Let me select both of the lanes. For right now, we'll go over to the Properties palette, and if I drag down to the bottom, right here we can see the lane width. Let's change this. I'll make it 10 feet. You can see how that works. That's the parameter that we created in Subassembly Composer. Let me set that back to 12. Here's my lane material. I have access to that. Maybe this is going to be concrete. So it defaults to asphalt, but I can make it whatever I want for pulling materials. Here's my super elevation properties. I'm not going to set those just yet. Right here I can adjust my cross slope. We'll make that 5%. We can see how that works. And I also have my pavement thickness. For right now, we'll make that a half a foot. And then we'll bump it back to a foot. So all of those seem to be working. Those are all the parameters that we created in Subassembly Composer. Let me press Escape. Let's create a quick corridor now. I'm going to come up and click the corridor button. I'll create a corridor called First Street. That's the name of the alignment I'm using. I'm going to use the finished grade profile of that alignment. I'll use my Subassembly Composer test assembly that I made right here. No target surface just yet, and I'll come down and click OK. For my frequency, let me click the ellipsis button, and as we go around the curves, I'd like the frequency controlled by curvature. That'll tighten it up around the bends. Let me click OK, and we'll rebuild. There we go. Let me zoom in, and I can select this corridor, and we'll go to isolate for right now. Let me isolate that, and then I'll click my orbit button. We'll orbit this up, and I'll zoom in. I'll press escape here. And if I hover over these feature lines, I can see the code, edge of traveled way. If I hover here, I can see the crown. So the feature lines are being created just like I wanted them to. Okay, that looks good. I'm going to go back to a top view. I'll type plan and press enter twice. Next, we'll take a quick look at this in the section editor. Let me come down to the isolate button and we'll end object isolation. I'll select the corridor and then I'll choose section editor. There we go. Now I can see the lane. I can see the plan view and the profile. I can start stepping through this, and I can see, for right now, the lanes are static. Okay, we're in a fill situation here. As I get a little bit closer and we start coming down, we'll see that existing surface, and then we go into eventually a cut situation. So there's the lanes. Let me close this out. So far, so good. Let's create a target now. I'm going to go to the Home tab, and I'm just going to create a polyline. I'll draw my polyline from here to here. Let me tap F8 to turn off my ortho, and we'll create an arc. There we go. We'll use this as a horizontal target. I'm going to turn it into a feature line. I'll say create feature line from object, and I'll select this one. And I will give this a name. We'll call it sample target. I'd like to assign elevations. Let me click OK. So not only is this going to be a horizontal target, but I'd like its elevations based on the existing ground surface. Let me click OK. So now if I click on that, you can see that is as if it was draped along that existing surface. Let's assign this as a target. Let me click the corridor. I'll go to Edit Targets. And I'll click in the region. Right here, we can see the targets supported on the left and right. Here's the formal names. I want this on the right side. I'm going to be targeting an object in the drawing. Let me select my feature line. I'll click OK. I would also like to use that same object as a vertical target. So here on the right side, we'll control the edge of traveled way elevation. Select from drawing. I'll select that same feature line. I'll come down and click OK. OK. There we go. We can see that. Let me click on the corridor. We'll go to section editor, and then I can step through this, and you can see where the lane pulls over and follows that target, both horizontal, and we can tell the vertical is working because it's matching the surface. So that's good. The lane object is doing exactly what we want with respect to the targeting. Let's close the section editor, and I'm going to select that target, and I'll press delete. We'll take that out. Let's check the super elevation. I'm going to come over to my assembly, and I'll select this lane on the right. And as far as super elevation is concerned, I'm going to say axis of rotation is supported, and I want this to be a right outside lane slope. I have a column for the right outside lane in my super elevation that I assigned to my alignment. And then for the left side, we're going to say that the axis of rotation is supported, and we're going to make this a left outside lane slope. Perfect. Let's come back over and we'll select the corridor, and we'll come up and rebuild. And then we'll see if the super elevation's working. I'll select the corridor and I'll go to section editor. And then as we step through this, we can see how that's lifting up until we get to full super. And since I've got an S turn here, it doesn't transition back to a normal crown. It just transitions right over to the other full super. And then as it reaches the end of the alignment, it'll transition back down to a normal crown. Now that I'm finished testing, I'll go ahead and close the section editor. So as you can see, very easy to go through and create a custom part if you want to. We have at this point looked at how we can create static objects, we can assign variables, we can assign targets, we can assign super elevation. In the next session, we're going to go back to our part and look at a few more advanced concepts. We'll add some custom daylighting.